What's up, y'all? You are listening to For the Artists, a podcast brought to you by Creative M Projects. I'm your host, Melissa Sharee, and today we're doing something a little different, okay? If you're watching, I am live and in person with our guest for this week, okay, which I'm loving. And let me tell you about our guest, okay? JOANNA Patton. She was born and raised in Las Vegas, Nevada, a place that I do visit quite frequently. I haven't been in a minute though. Okay, listen, her dad was a taxi driver and even had run-ins with the mafia. Say what? She spent her tween years through college in Arizona, another place I frequent pretty often, where a majority of her family lives. She is of Latin-Native-Jewish heritage, and yes, all of those cultures were equally represented in her upbringing. She's a Christian, and this has played a huge role in who she is today. She is a singer-songwriter, an amateur artist. We'll be the judge of that. Dancer and spoken word. She's a full-time missionary with YWAM LA, and she has a deep love for culture and how it shapes who we are. In recent years, she has recorded some of the songs that she's composed and written. We can ask her about that. And she's also hoping to release more in the upcoming year, which is awesome. Again, her family has shaped most of who she is as an individual. Her mom was a talented artist, dancer, singer, and writer. Her dad was a singer too. Oh my gosh, my dad sings. Drummer, guitarist. Wow, and a writer. So definitely all of that stuff passed on, okay? Some of her favorite memories are of singing with her dad while he played the guitar. And as soon as she could talk, she was basically singing, okay? She has a heart to see this generation walking in the fullness of who God called them and made them to be, with no comparison, no compromise, and no fear. Let's get into it. JOANNA, welcome. I just realized, you turned off all your phones for no sound, and I don't know that I did that. So hopefully no one tries to call me right now, because we're going to hear a little ding dinging, but you know what? It'll be fine. It'll be fine. All right. So you're in LA now, but you were in Vegas before. How long have you been in LA?
I've been in LA now for going on 2 years.
Okay, 2 years.
Yes.
And what do you love most about LA? Is there anything? Do you have a love for LA yet?
Yes, I do actually. So it's been an adventure. I've never lived in LA before. Never really saw myself living in California when I was young. So two things that I have really come to love are the ocean. Some people love the beach, but I particularly love the ocean. Okay. It's one of my favorite places to be because it makes you feel your smallness in the world. And where I currently live is in a place right in between Silmar and Lakeview Terrace. And so it's right up by the mountains and surrounded by horse property. So I've come to love the diversity of the city. Like you drive 20, 30 minutes, you're at the beach. You drive another 15, 20 minutes, depending on traffic, and you are downtown LA. You're like right in the city. And then you drive another 20, 30 minutes and you're like right there in the mountains. So I feel like LA has so much to offer, geographically speaking, but also just so many different types of people.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. And being a part of Youth with a Mission is actually global. And so it's a missions organization. That's where I currently live and serve with. And I had recently heard that Los Angeles has, I might misquote this, but I heard like 130 plus languages.
I think I saw a story. There was some news station that ran a story about the diversity of LA, and they talked about the number of languages, the number of like all of that. And it was just like, whoa.
Yes.
Definitely we're like number one, I think, in all of the 50 states for having those numbers in terms of diversity.
Yep. Huge, diverse population, different cultures represented. You've got little Tokyo, you've got Koreatown, you've got all these areas. The area where I live here is a huge Latino community. So I really love how so much of like what God loves is represented just right here in the city.
Aw, I'm starting to have a new love for LA all over again, just listening to you.
Respect.
There was something that you said though. You talked about how the ocean, one of the things that you love about the ocean is is the feeling small.
Yeah.
And I wanted to hang there for a second because I feel like when it comes to artistry and being creative, especially kind of being in LA with the Hollywood vibe, no one wants to feel small. Like everyone wants to be like larger than life and big.
Yeah.
And so I don't even know what my question is, but I was recently in Kona, and one of the things that I love about going over to the Hawaiian Islands is that similar thing. It's like it really gives you a perspective of your place in terms of the created versus the creator. And I think there's such a value in that. And I guess my question would be, I don't know, as an artist, do you ever intentionally find yourself in spaces where you like are okay being small?
In Los Angeles as an artist?
Yeah.
I think I'm learning to grow in my comfortability of feeling small, because like as an artist, like you said, everybody wants to be larger than life, but especially if you come to a place like Los Angeles, it seems everyone is so talented and you're always going to find somebody. I feel like in artistry, there's comparison constantly. And so if you live your life in comparison, you never feel big enough. You're always questioning who you are. You're doubting what God made you to be. So I think in terms of like growing comfortable with the smallness is going, first of all, we're all really small in terms of the size of the universe. And for me, it's walking in a place of humility. It's recognizing that there's always going to be something or someone bigger than me and being okay with that.
Yeah.
And being okay to go, this is the lane that I have. This is what I have to offer. I can never be Beyonce. And Jesus, I don't want to be, because she is beautiful. She's talented. I cannot hit those vocals. I do not have that range. I cannot hit those runs. And I understand the technique and the sacrifice that comes with where she is. But I think if we're always trying to live our life to be something other than what we are, you miss who God made you to be. So going back to like feeling the smallness, I love being reminded that even though everything in the world feels so much bigger than I am, like God's looking out for me. Like I can stand there and just be in awe. I can stand there with another artist and just be in awe of who God made them to be, and to appreciate what they have to offer in the world is unique to them. And it's beautiful.
Yes. So well said. I love that. There's so much power in that. Because I do think that artists can fall into that trap, the comparison trap. Yeah. And then it will just discourage you from moving forward in what you have and what you've been given. And, you know, sometimes people will end up stopping because they don't think they're enough.
Yeah.
So, all right. So you started singing first.
Yes.
Because I know you do a lot of other things.
That's okay.
And yeah, so your memories of singing with your dad. So did your dad teach you how to sing?
He did. Yeah. My dad was primarily self-taught. He was a hustler. He was actually born and raised here in Los Angeles until he was 16. So he came up running in Hollywood. He was very talented. And I think he wanted to deposit a little bit of like who he was into his daughter. And I was singing anyway. So he's like, if you're going to sing, you might as well do it properly. And so like, those are some of my earliest memories, of sitting with him playing his acoustic guitar and us singing. And I didn't know that he was teaching me technique. But it was also just a time to like bond over a shared love of music. And to this day, like the acoustic guitar is one of my favorite sounds in the world.
Can you play?
A little bit.
Yes.
Yeah.
I ventured down that road for a little bit, but literally like a day.
Yeah. I would say I'm growing towards proficiency.
Okay.
But am I an amazing guitarist? No. I'm okay with that.
I would love to hear you play. Okay. I would love it. Man, I had a question for you and then I got excited and then I lost it. But it'll come back. It'll come back. That's what it was. Okay. So you loved singing as a kid, but did you have dreams of what you were going to do with singing or as a singer, or when you were little, or you just loved to do it? There was no dream associated with it of like, I'm going to be this or I'm going to do that.
I think looking back, I just loved music. I loved singing. It wasn't something that I looked at as I need to make a career out of this someday. And I think for me, I at that time anyways, my family was in and out of the church, but at that time, my dad was like a worship leader. So I always understood music in terms of something that's like a gift given to God. Like he gave this to me, I want to give it back. And I did it just for the joy of singing. And I have like an uncle that told me once that I literally sang to him from Las Vegas to Phoenix. So it was simply because it's something that I loved to do and it just came out of me. I never thought about it in terms of something I could do as a career. I just loved to sing. I just loved it.
Okay.
And making up songs and all of that. So yeah.
So you got into songwriting.
Uh-huh.
And what is that like? I mean, do you write regularly, like every day?
So
I love how you laugh at that question.
Yeah. Well, because when you grow up and you have so many more responsibilities, the dream is that you have time to write every day. I don't have time to write music every day, but I am a writer. So the way that I process the world, the way that I process things going on is through words on paper. And it's actually easier for me to express what I'm thinking and what I'm feeling through words on paper. I have more time to think through it and it just, yeah. So, in answer to your question, I don't write music every day, but I do write constantly.
Okay.
Words have kind of been my thing since I was little. Like my dad also made sure that we knew how to read really, really well. So I think by the time I was 11 or 12, I had like a high school, college reading level. So I've always really loved words. I've loved language. I've loved the English language. So, and then in growing up, other languages. So, writing is the way that I process the world. It's the way that I process God. It's the way that I process people and situations. So,
okay. So would you say then that your motivation for writing is more for self? I don't mean that in a bad way.
No.
Versus like, some people write and they're like, I got to get this message out. This is a message for the people. Like, everyone's motivation is different. So would you say that yours is more geared towards just self and self-process? Or
I would say it's both and. A lot of what I have been writing lately has been God-centered. It's me walking out like who he is, what has he done in my life. But it does help me process. I write for the love of writing. I love because this is how God created me to process the world. So in answer to your question, like, yeah, it does. It helps me process. And some of that makes it into my songs. They can be like, some of them very sad and like contemplative. But it reminds me a little bit too of like, if you were to take it from like a Bible standpoint, for example, David was a writer. He wrote all of the Psalms pretty much, except for there were a few in there from some guy named Asaph. But if you read through them, he's processing everything that's happening to him, everything that's going on in the world. He's processing like all these promises that he had over his life that just don't seem to make sense when everything is going in the opposite direction. So he writes and he ends up writing some of this beautiful literature, like historic literatures, the Psalms. Highly recommend reading them. And so I would say, like, for me, it's a very similar in terms of like, this is how God has created me to process, is to write through what I'm going through, but also it's a way to wrestle through what's happening in the world and what's wrestling through what's happening in your life. And God, where are you? So yeah. And it's a reminder too, if I can throw this in there, like one thing that I love about the Psalms is he always goes back to, but this is who you are, God. This is what's happening to me. This is what I'm going through, but this is who you are. And I remind myself of that.
Yes. I love that. I can relate.
Yeah.
I was recently with a friend, and there's this like, what is that? I'm going to get the name wrong, but it's basically some AI thing. It was like in the news recently because it was like writing people's college papers. Like it's like CGI or I don't know, something like that. But I was with my friend and they showed me how this thing like will write a song.
Wow.
Like literally you will put in there like write a song about I don't know. Write a song about lollipops and it will spit out a song about lollipops like verse, chorus, verse, chorus, hook. And it's like in like a minute. It's crazy. So I don't know where I was going with that, but it's like, it just makes you think, it's like, yeah, that thing can put words down on paper.
Yeah.
But it's missing the essence probably.
Yeah.
That actually comes from a person.
Yep. Yep.
Pouring out whatever their actual experience is that they're going through.
Yeah. Because I think like AI, and I've heard of that, by the way, because AI takes the information that's given to it, similar to the way that our brains process, and it just kind of spits it out in a poetic form, because it's got all these, books and things available to it to kind of pull from and go, this is how you do poetry. This is how you write a song. And then it just kind of puts it into that. I think the thing that sets people apart though, is that so what I personally believe is we're made in the image of God, right? In his likeness, and God is the ultimate creator, which means that we are created to create. So AI can copy, but it can never actually create.
Yeah. Yes. Can copy, but it cannot create. But that makes me think too, just in terms of process as songwriters, it's we want to make sure we stay in the human lane.
Yeah.
If that makes sense, because you can, if you study songwriting, you can almost get robotic, with this is the formula, A, B, or maybe I'm going to do A, B, C, D, D. You know what I mean?
Okay.
And you're so busy focusing on that, then you lose kind of some of the, I don't know, just the humanness of it. Am I making sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's good to have form to help you, but I think you can't let form rule you necessarily.
Yeah. No, I agree. Yeah. No, I agree. Because I think the thing is if you have God, for example, if you read the book of Genesis, again, highly recommend it. It says God spoke and it was. And so if we are created in the image of that, then we can create by speaking, right? So, and I think when you are wanting to put something into words, we don't recognize first of all, how beautiful that actually is. I think we become so common, especially now in the information age with AI, with the internet, words and music. It's just common. We don't think about the process behind it anymore. But if you actually think about the process in terms of how we were made to process, it's actually really beautiful that we have the ability to take human emotions and human dynamics and what's happening behind our eyes constantly, and to put that onto paper and then to put that to a song, and that could actually impact someone else's heart. AI can't do that.
Yeah. AI can't do that.
AI can't do that.
I had a thought again, and then I got wrapped up in what you were saying. It's okay. It will come back.
Happy Thursday. We're almost there.
It just came back. Okay. So right now, in all your glory and all your lightness and your brightness, and you know what I mean? You're a very strong, confident, know who you are woman. Okay. And that comes across, not in any sort of arrogant way either. But my guess is that you weren't always like that.
No.
So I'm what was it like for you as a creative or as an artist when you were not in that, fully in that confidence? And how did you move into that space? Was there a particular person? I mean, obviously there's God.
Yeah.
But I mean, was there a particular person or a thing or an experience that kind of helped you transition from the, I don't really know who I am, and I'm not sure, and I'm a little shaky, into, yes, I show up and this is who God created me to be?
Yeah. Whew. That, I mean, you could spend hours unpacking that, but I would say all of the above. I believe that God places people in our lives to speak into who we're made to be. I grew up being not very confident. I was a very shy kid, actually. I preferred books to people, books and animals to people. I was not very confident. I was very quiet. And I think I spent a lot of my life personally in comparison and self-hatred. So I would continually look at someone else and, oh man, they're better than me. So why, I can never be that. And I think I have had, number one, I've had God in my life. And he's the ultimate, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's like, Psalm 139 says, I made you in your mother's womb. I knew you before you were born. So before anybody had an opinion about who we are, God knew us.
Yes.
So there's that. But he did place mentors in my life. One of my closest friends to this day, I've known her and her family for over 20 years. Her and her husband took over this tiny little church that my mom dragged me to when I was 13. I didn't want to be there. And they were so authentic and so real in their expression of who they were, just being themselves. Like, they were Latino. Her husband was a Christian DJ. She used to be a hip hop dancer. And they take over this little youth group. Like, made no sense for them to be where they were, but like, God, I believe, personally placed them in my path, because I didn't know where I was going when I was young. I didn't have like a picture or a vision for something larger than my life. I came from a very poor family. I came from a very poor background. It was like survival, my background. It was very much very difficult family circumstances. And we didn't have a lot of resources available to us. I think at some point I just stopped dreaming. And it's almost like God planted her there to say like, hey, knock, knock, like, I made you in your mother's womb, and I know what I've called you for, and I'm going to put people in your path to remind you and to call it out. And she did. So she was that mentor in my life that was like, no, Joanna, like, this is what I see in you. And I couldn't see it in myself yet. I could not see it yet. And her consistency in remaining in that place and seeing value where I did not see value in myself was what made a huge change for me. She's like, no, you are smart. You are talented. You are called to the nations. And I'm like, as a kid, I'm just like, I am? Really? Like, I can leave the hood.
I can leave the hood.
I can leave the hood. And that's very real for me. I mean, I'm laughing about it, but the truth of the matter is, like, that was my background. Like, it was really heartbreaking as a kid, like, knowing by the time I was 11 how to hit the floor in a drive-by. Like, that was my reality. And so having a mentor in my life kind of took me out of that world and showed me there's a whole other world possible. And by the way, this is who God says you are. And she began to speak identity over me and into me. And then I began to read the Bible, and they're taking me through and showing me like, this is who God says you are. This is who you're made to be. And it was like over time through that process of continually hearing what the truth actually was. Because there's the thoughts that we have, right? And those are lies. I believe, and we can feed into them ourselves, honestly. We can't blame it always on someone else. We can lie to ourselves and say, oh, you're not good enough. That's right. You're never going to be X, Y, or Z. And so when you look and you stare at truth, and then you're looking at God, who is truth himself, right? And I'll be bold about that, because I knew who I was without him. I was going nowhere. And so I look at that, and he begins to use these people in my life to restore me back to who I was made to be. That identity, I think identity piece was for me a huge revelation of going, I am made in the image and the likeness of God. He was a creator, and it began to pull something out of me that began to cause me to dream. And then I discovered, like, right between, I would say, the age of like 14, 15, that I loved to dance. And I learned how to do hip hop and salsa, contemporary ballet. And it opened this whole new world that creating was actually an outlet for emotion, for like the way that you feel, like you could create. And it was just beautiful to me. And I was like, God made these things. God created dance. He created laughter. He created music. He created words. And so it was through that process of being mentored, being exposed also to like some amazing musicians through my life. Later on, God opened the door for me to go to music school, which was something I never saw for myself. It was a miracle to me from where I came from, to get to spend 4 years learning and working on like vocal performance. I was like, this is amazing. This is a dream come true that I didn't even dream. And God's like, but this is what I have for you. This is who you are. And again, it just speaks back to that worth. That if God says, this is who you are, then that makes me worth something. Anyways, I could go on and on about that.
I love it.
Yes. So.
There's so many places I could go from what you just said. Like, honestly, I mean, one of the things that I really love about arts and being able to create is that it can take you out of your circumstance, your condition, you know, like instantly. if you put your mind on, you know, moving or singing or whatever, I mean, you transcend into that space.
Yeah.
And I know for me, that was like survival. Like that helped me survive some like, you know, some really tough times as a kid that nobody even knew I was in that dark space. But that's what the creativity and the arts did for me. There was something that came across in your paperwork where you were asked to identify what kind of an artist you were. And I know we've talked about you being a singer, a songwriter, a writer, a dancer, but I remember you used the phrase intercessory art or intercessory artist. So I definitely want to like talk to you a little bit about that.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, what does that mean to you and why do you use that as a way to categorize yourself? Because that obviously has value and meaning to you. You mean you use that?
Yeah. Yeah. So basically the term intercessory is to do with intercession or prayer. And so for me, it's walking through something with God. So a lot of like pieces that I've created, for example, I've created when I'm processing through like things that are happening in my family, you know, one of those that I could say where I really grew in this area of intercessory prophetic art and dance and music was when my dad was going through like years of illness. He was very, very sick for a long time and I was his caregiver. And so for me, having a creative outlet to process I felt very like blocked in terms of like, I felt like I lost my creativity during that time. It was very difficult. And so I actually had friends of mine that were part of the International House of Prayer in Kansas City. And she was at what she called a prophetic artist. I said, what does that mean? She goes, well, we sit in the prayer room in the presence of God and we talk to him about these things. And we ask him to speak to us about these things. And then whatever he speaks to us, or sometimes he speaks to us through pictures in our minds, or we'll have an idea, then you paint that, you draw it, or you dance it. And I was like, oh, wow, like I never thought of that before. So some of those things that I was facing in my personal life, I began to take those things into prayer. And as I'm taking them into prayer, it's like God begins to show me. Cause like for me, like as an artist, I see things visually. So if somebody tells me a story, I can see what they're saying. And sometimes that's really good and it's really bad. But it's a gift or a curse. So in the place of intercession or in the place of prayer, when I am taking those things before God and he's showing me, then I can immediately pull out like my sketchbook, or I can pull out a canvas and I can sketch out and then paint what I'm seeing right there on the spot. Because this is the thing that I believe, and the connection for me is creating with God. That's the best way I would describe it. And for me, he's become like a source of comfort. He's become a source of inspiration. You know, if you think actually back to 18th, 19th century art and music, were people who were meditating on who God was. And that's where you had pieces like Beethoven and Bach. People don't know this. They were meditating on God in these huge cathedrals. And then they created some of this beautiful music and art that exists. And so this is for me is like recapturing that connection with God, and from that place of inspiration and prayer creating.
Very cool. Yes.
Does that make sense?
It makes sense to me. Y'all, does it make sense? I think it makes sense to them too. And if not, you know what? They can play it back and listen to it a couple times. Sometimes you gotta let things marinate, you know? Let it percolate. Okay, so now where you're at in your life, what sort of dreams do you see for yourself as it relates to being an artist and being creative?
So I would say, oh man, that's a little bit more tricky to answer. I would say what I want to do is I want to create things that inspire others, especially because I myself had been mentored. Like that's actually part of why I'm with Youth with a Mission. And they exist really to help give the younger generation a vision and a mission for their life. Like what can you do in the world about the things that you see? And so for me, art is very much driven towards leading others towards who they are, calling out their identity. I like to use it as a vehicle for a message. That's how I see it. Also for the process and the love of creating, but also the inspiration for me was it reminds me of the song Amazing Grace, right? And I'm going to use that as a basis for what I'll say. It says, Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now found. I was blind, but now I see.
Mm-hmm.
And what that does is love compels you to do something. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, music, a lot of the music that I've written has come from meditating on like, this is where I was going nowhere. I was blind. I was lost.
Mm-hmm.
I was a dropout at one point. And God, by your mercy, you pulled me out and you set me with kings and princes. I don't understand it,
Mm-hmm.
but it's because you love and you value me. And if that's how you feel about me, how do you feel about everybody else? They need to know. And so I see art as a way also to express my heart before the Lord. But there's also been times when he's had me say like, you know, he showed me a picture for someone that I'm praying for. And I just have this overwhelming urgency and need to like draw this out and give it to them. And I've had people tell me like, that impacted me.
Mm-hmm.
Be able to show them exactly in that moment what God thinks about them, how he sees them or their life or their situation, and give it to them is impacting. And I think it's beautiful. So the dream for me is to be able to use music, to be able to use art, even be able to use dance to tell the message of who God is to people who have forgotten him, that maybe do not even know he exists, or maybe they think, you know, I know there's something bigger out there in the universe. I don't know what it is, but I feel like I was made for something more. It's to point and to direct them back towards, that's right, like you were made for more.
Mm-hmm.
And so I see art as a vehicle for that. It's a vehicle for me to be able to express like my heart to God, but also to be able to lead people back to the phrase, I guess, would be like original design.
Okay.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Because God saw value in me, and because someone else saw value in me and called it out, I am where I am today. And now I want to live my life calling that out in others. And there's a phrase that I heard once that I absolutely loved, and it was like, call out the gold in others. Be the one that calls out the gold. You know, anybody can call out the dirt, but can you be the one that calls out the gold and to cause them to see things that they don't yet see? Because that's actually what God does.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like the seed under the ground, and it's dark and it's hidden, and that thing is dying and doesn't quite know yet what's going on. And you're like, hang on, it's okay, Lamb, I'm gonna water you. Let me encourage you. Like, you're gonna grow. You're gonna be beautiful one day. You know, like there is, in touching this, like I have actually a mustard seed on my necklace.
Okay, cool.
Yes, I have a mustard seed. And there's a verse in the Bible that says, if you have the faith the size of a mustard seed, you will speak to a mountain and see it be moved. And so for me, art is the ability to put words or image or music behind that idea, and those themes that are encouraging and life-bringing and inspirational.
Y'all, listen, let me tell you something about Joanna, okay? She is infectious. That's what I'm going to say. That's the word I'm going to use for you today, infectious. That is so good. And as you're talking, you know, it's almost like coming full circle back to kind of what we were talking about in the beginning a little bit, because it's like what you're describing is like personal versus public. And neither one is like better than the other.
Yeah.
So I don't want to say that, but I mean, I feel like when, as artists or creatives, when we are doing our craft, it's like we have to be very clear, I think, about like our intention, our method, our approach, you know. And yours, to me, when you're describing it, it's a very personal approach in terms of what you're sharing and what you're giving out. Whereas sometimes people are very intentional about, well, I just want to be public. I just want to like reach masses of people, like, you know what I mean? So anyway, but it takes me back to the beginning of the conversation and the idea of smallness, you know, because it's almost like sometimes you got to change your lens, because it's like what we think is small is actually great. You know, just because you're small in the grand scheme of things doesn't detract from your greatness. We still have impact, you know, and it's just, so I don't know, that's very cool. I appreciate you sharing kind of where you're at with your goals and what you see for yourself and your dreams. So when you do your intercessory art that you talked about, like the pictures and things like that, I know you share them to people like personally that you know, but do you ever like put that stuff in other places where people that you don't necessarily know personally might find it or see it?
I think I would like to. We've done that here in LA. Part of something that YWAM does is we go out regularly to Venice Beach or to Hollywood, and we love to go encourage people. I have taken some of my art pieces, and God will like highlight certain ones, like this is for somebody, or to create something entirely new, and then to write something on the back that encourages them. And then you go out and God's like, that person, and like, aha, so you give it to them. So I've given my art out in terms of having it displayed in different places. I've only lived here for a year, so I'm not really certain where that could be. I'd be open to the idea, but mostly I've given it very personally. I've sent them out as gifts. I've turned them into postcards. So I think back to just this last week, we were actually in Hollywood just a couple days ago, because we'll regularly go out on Monday afternoons to Hollywood. God's really highlighted that as a place that he wants to shine some light. And so we actually met an artist there, and extremely talented. He had this huge, beautiful painting. He was very depressed though, because like he's got all this talent in him, but he just needs to be able to pay his rent. And I looked at him and I'm like, I don't have anything to give him. And God's like, just tell him I see him. Sometimes it's that. Sometimes it's looking at it, being able to appreciate the artwork that he had. I go, you have beautiful technique. What do you use? Is that acrylic? He says, no, it's oil. And then it's just speaking encouragement. I think that is art as well. Sometimes the art of being able to communicate the heart of God to somebody. I don't currently have any of my pieces hanging anywhere though, no. Except for in dear friends' houses who have bought them in the past to support my different journeys that I've been on. But,
yeah. How do you know what to focus on? Like, because you have the singing, the songwriting, the dancing, the writing, the visual art. I mean, how do you know what to focus on?
For me, it's all about seasons. So there's been different seasons where I've definitely found that I focus more in on art. And for me, it's like highlighted, like it's all different ways to communicate, but for me, it's also a different way to connect with God. So I would say in the season, I feel like music has definitely been more highlighted to me, and past seasons has been art. So I would say it's seasons. It's knowing your season. It's knowing how much time you have to do something. So I've gone back to art, being able to like sketch things out has been more personal once again. And writing consistently, singing consistently, being asked now to come and go to different places in Los Angeles and sing or lead out in things. So it's really about knowing which doors are open at that time, instead of trying to knock on all of them all at once, because that's exhausting.
Yeah.
It's going, okay, like for me personally as a Christian, like, God, what are you calling me to do right now? You know, these are the doors that are open and available to me. Is music right now. So that's what I'm currently focusing on.
Okay.
In past seasons, it's been dance. So yeah, just know your season.
Know your season.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we are going to begin to start wrapping up because, we could be on here talking forever. Yeah. We just keep on going. But I guess I want to ask you if there's something that you could tell a young person who is not really sure as to whether or not they are a creative person, or whether or not they have the talent. Can't think of another way to say that. Like, what would you tell someone that's struggling to, like, struggling with whether or not, am I really talented? Like, do I have talent? Like, am I creative? What would you tell that person? I mean, you've kind of alluded to some stuff earlier in what you said, but I just want to reiterate some of those things if it's fresh on your heart right now.
Yeah. I think it's knowing what's in your hands. That's the phrase that comes to mind. I think, especially right now, the focus is on what is everybody else doing. So you feel inadequate or like lacking because you're not able to do what someone else is doing. So we're continually comparing ourselves to one another, and that makes you not feel good enough. So I would say it's like, okay, don't think of your creativity in terms of like, is it good enough because it matches up to someone else's? But like looking, okay, God, what have you put in my hands to do? And to water that and to nurture that. And to recognize that this is what God made you to do. Maybe you can't sing and dance and draw and do it all simultaneously. Like maybe what your gifting is writing. It's like, can you nurture that? Can you pour into that? And then also, I think it goes back to identity, is knowing that like you're made in the image of God, right? And I want to go back that I'm feeling that phrase highlighted again. You're created to create, right?
Yeah.
So if you're made in the image of God, who made everything that we see, he spoke in mountains and oceans and every beautiful thing that we can think of, that God made you.
Yeah.
So what are the possibilities if you tap into what he made you to be? But comparison kills that creativity, right? And we spoke a little bit about identity, self-hatred, like actually going and hammering in those things and going, wait a minute, like, am I continually comparing myself to someone else? Do I actually not like who I am? And I wish I were someone else. That actually kills creativity.
Yeah.
And so my encouragement to a younger person struggling is like, number one, go find out who God made you to be. You won't find it in so-and-so up the street. You won't find it in Beyonce because she's her. There's only going to be one her. There is. That's just the way it is.
That's a mic drop. Boop.
Like, so we can copy, but we don't want to become like a bunch of people running around being AI. Are we just trying to copy other people?
Right.
Are we just trying to be something else? Because the reality is, at the end of the day, we don't like who we are. It's like, go look at that. It's like, wait a minute. Like, I can't be Melissa. I can't be someone else. I can only be who God made me to be. And that would be my encouragement, is knowing what's in your hands. What is God giving you? You know, if you got a house plant sitting in your house that you never water, it's going to die. So if you've got a gift that God has placed inside of you, and he's not sorry that he made you a brilliant artist, like with the mind for words or painting or dance. But are you watering that, or are you spending time looking at other people's?
Yes. So good. And I'll just add one little thing to what you're saying in terms of like, you know, do what's in your hands. It's like, somebody might be like, well, what does that mean? Like, you know, what do you mean? But it's like, if you have a natural inclination to be able to do something well, without a whole lot of like or whatever, and it's actually something that you like or you're passionate about, I mean, there you go.
There you go.
Start there. You like to do it and it comes easy. Well, bam, I think you've been naturally gifted in that. So why don't you roll with it?
That's right. And some people, and I want to say this too, though, some people are just like, they breathe and a song comes out. They roll over and they create a dance. And some people have to work a little harder at it. That's okay.
But if you love it, you don't mind working at it. Right. So I feel like, you know what I mean? Like one of the two has got to be there.
Yeah. So you think about it, it's like, but even like, think about the different kinds of creativity, right? Business. You can be creative in business. You can be creative in so many different things. Like, you know, like one thing that, and if we can end on this, if that's okay.
Yeah. No.
The one thing that I love about like YWAM is like, it leaves room for creativity. They believe that God created us to go into every sphere of society. So if your lane is business, then go and find out like what you're passionate about. Like if you love people, like go and like, you know, if you love communication, go. Like, so I feel like we get pigeonholed into so many different things. And like, yeah, like niching is good, knowing your lane is good. But also too, it's like, just because it doesn't look like someone else's doesn't mean you're not creative.
Yes. Okay, we're gonna end there. We're gonna end there because we could keep going, y'all. I just want to thank you so much for agreeing, for saying yes and being willing. You guys, as we wrap up, listen, I have been talking to JOANNA Patton, the one and the only. There is no one else like her. Okay, don't even try to be like her, but you can definitely take some of the things that she said and you can implement them into, you know, what it is you're trying to do to move forward, right?
Yeah.
All right. So you've been listening to For the Artists, which is a podcast brought to you by Creative M Projects. I've been your host, Melissa Sharee. And again, y'all give it up for JOANNA Patton. She was outstanding and amazing. And you know what? We tried the on location thing for the first time. Stay tuned. More things coming. All right. Bye. Until next week, y'all already know what it is. I want you to keep creating from the inside out. Bye.
Bye.